Hi, I'm talking today to UK landscape architect Emily Ross. Hi Emily, thank you so much for letting me interview you today for Askimo's International Library of Interviews with Experts.
Hi Joanne, it's good to meet you and to talk to you.
Excellent, lovely to be talking to you today too, Emily. So Emily, today we're discussing landscape architecture and some frequently asked questions. So let's begin with what is landscape architecture or a landscape architect?
Landscape architecture is to do with anything to do with our external environment, really. It can be about natural landscapes or man-made landscapes. And landscape architects are in the profession of conserving them, enhancing them, and building new landscapes as well. A landscape architect is a professionally qualified landscape designer and a member of the Lanscape Institute, which is the royal chartered body to which we belong.
What is the difference between a landscape architect and a garden designer?
A landscape architect generally tends to work on more commercial schemes, often bigger projects. However, a garden designer might do that as well, but they tend to work on more private gardens and that kind of project. There is a lot of overlap, but the training is different. There's different courses for garden designers, and also they have a different professional body, which is called the Society of Garden Designers.
How do you become a landscape architect?
Okay, well, if you decide you want to be a landscape architect when you're at school, you can go straight to university and do an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture. You need to find a course that's accredited by the Lanscape Institute. And generally the course is about 3 years. Then you take a year in working for a landscape practice to get some hands-on experience. And then you go back and do a final year. The other route, which is the route that I took, is you might have done have an environmental background, like I did a biology and geography degree, or you might have done another career first, like be an engineer or an artist or a bank or something, but you then decide, yes, this is what I want to do, I want to change profession, I want to be a landscape architect. So you can do it as a postgraduate, which takes about 2 years. And for either of those two routes, whether you do it as an undergrad or a postgrad, once you've got that qualification and you start working for a landscape practice, you tend to do a minimum of 2 years getting some experience in companies, and then you'll take some professional exams which will allow you to become chartered. There's a really good website which the Landscape Architect have done called iwanttobealandscapearchitect.com, so have a look there for more information.
What kind of projects would a landscape architect work on?
There's a really wide variety depending on what type of company that you work for. They could be to do with designing new landscapes or managing existing ones, or assessing landscapes as well. I started out being very interested in the reclamation of landscapes that were derelict or contaminated, like coal mines, because of the ecological background that I had. I was interested in how those could be revegetated and used by people again. But after working for a few years, I've become a lot more interested in the urban side of landscape architecture, designing spaces and streets in towns and cities. I quite like all the hard landscape detailing that involves. Other types of projects though, public parks and play areas, restoring a historic landscape. Just thinking about one of the most prominent landscape projects that's been in the news recently, the Olympic Park this year. Obviously that's taken quite a few years planning, and landscape architects were very much at the heart of that. And obviously we saw the fruition of it this summer, but that's been planned for the last 5 years or however long, so that was a really exciting project for landscape architects to work on in that area. Also, assessing landscapes, like I mentioned, especially say a big rural area which might have pressures on for planning, people wanting to build more houses, making sure that's done in a sensitive way. So looking what's there, appreciating it, and making sure that the change is managed properly. Also, when big developments go ahead, like wind farms, the landscape needs to be assessed then to make sure these wind turbines have the minimum effect on the landscape and they're sited in the right place, as well as taking into consideration all the other aspects like the ecology of the area and the engineering. So that covers a few projects, I think. There's many others.
Are there any key issues that landscape architects are tackling at the moment?
I mentioned in the last question about housing. There's obviously a huge pressure to build more housing, and that's one of the big issues, making sure that that is built in the right way, really, that we retain our green areas in the countryside, that it doesn't become covered with housing everywhere. So we're working with planners and architects and other professionals on that to make sure those new homes can be built, but doing it in a sensitive way.
How do landscape architects make a difference in the world we live in?
Well, I think people almost forget that landscape is around them all the time, but we're moving through it every day. Everywhere we live and work and play has some kind of landscape in it. As we drive to work, we're driving down road corridors where the planting might have been designed by landscape architects. We go to parks to relax in, which obviously have an impact on our life and make us feel better, and they would have had a role of a landscape architect. So it's about helping to create better places where we can work, live and play, really, that make us feel better, that we can relax in, that are fun. Landscapes can be therapeutic as well. So the grounds to a hospital, for example, you could healing landscapes are quite an interesting subject. Designing places that are going to help people get better quicker. And also, similarly, in schools, you can have learning landscapes as well that are education and help children to learn more, taking the curriculum outside.
And just to finish off, how would I find a landscape architect in my local area?
Probably the best starting point is to look on the Lanscape Institute website. It has a register of all the practices, and you can refine a search by region, say the Northwest, or you can search for a company name if you know who you're looking for, or for a keyword. There's another good publication that the Landscape Institute do as well, called Landscape Architecture, a Guide for Clients. So that will give you advice about how to go about appointing one.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Okay, thanks, Joanne.